Welcome to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast,
where we discuss all things Bible and theology.
Because it matters. What you really believe determines how you really behave.
Now, here is your host, Associate Professor of Bible Exposition at Dallas Theological Seminary
and Professor of Bible and Theology for the National Theological College and Graduate School,
Dr. Paul Weaver.
Welcome back to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast. I'm your host, Paul Weaver. I have the wonderful privilege each week of leading conversations with some of my favorite Bible scholars and Bible expositors. Here at Dallas Theological Seminary, we are celebrating our 100th anniversary. And in our last episode, we began to discuss the history and legacy of Dallas Theological Seminary. We focused on the early days of the seminary, the starting of the school. I am pleased to have Dr. John Hanna back on the Bible and Theology Matters podcast. Dr. Hanna has taught at Dallas Theological Seminary for more than 40 years and has been associated with the school as a student first and then a professor for over 50 years. Dr. Hanna has earned a Master of Arts, a Master of Theology, a Doctor of Theology, and a second doctorate, a Doctor of Philosophy. He has also completed additional postdoctoral work at Yale University. Dr. Hanna has written many journal articles and books, including a 2-volume set on church history and a fascinating read on the history of Dallas Theological Seminary entitled An Uncommon Union, subtitled Dallas Theological Seminary and American Evangelicalism. And this book is the basis for most of our conversation today. Please join me as we listen in on our previously recorded conversation.
Chafer was a man of faith. And
a man of vision and faith. I would say his vision was too small. But no one had the vision. He wanted 100 students in a quadrangle.
Never did he think there'd be 2,600 students in 2020.
I think he would be rejoicing today.
But his faith was so strong that he required that of his employees too, as far as the paycheck. Tell us a little about that.
Dr. Chafer bought into, incorrectly, into the faith movement. Now, we all believe in faith and all that, but what they particularly meant was the model of Hudson Taylor, the great missionary, British missionary, and George Mueller, the German missionary that came to England, later found orphanages. In both cases, neither men, they just trusted God and didn't let people know the need. Dr. Chafer followed that. Although, there's evidence that or George Mueller had a very fancy magazine with the donors every month in it. So he did ask, but not the direct approach. It's more godly if you let God take care of it. We would say. So he also believed that we were all missionaries here. And therefore, we all live by faith. And this is why we lost Wayman Anderson. We weren't paying people. Chafer, with all the Bible conference itinerancy, he had a free pass on the railroads, could go anywhere in the country, from a man by the name of Todd. He was a board member.
I was wondering why the meeting where we're at right now, recording
Todd.
This.
Todd was a board member in the 30s, and he got him a eternal universal pass. So he could go to Portland, Oregon, or Philadelphia, Winnipeg, Canada, anywhere. It's really fun. And yet, guys, the unsung guys here, Zollicoffer Brown, Perpetuo, some of these guys had no other income. And so when they complain, that's why Antonio Perpetuo, who taught Greek and Hebrew, left because they just couldn't manage, in their view. Chafer saw that as a lack of faith. And that's why he reorganized the school in 1929 from a single board, because he wanted his view in it.
And Schofield died before.
Yeah, he died in
started.
21. Chafer came here about that time.
And was Chafer pastoring that church?
Yes.
When and all the income was coming from the church
That's right.
he pastored.
Yeah, he was pastoring Schofield. And he pastored it down to about 26, 27, because it just got too busy for him, because he was a major fundraiser, really. But it's the no-name guys like Thomas Chafer who are some of the unsung heroes. Dr. Chafer lived in University Park off Edmund Street. He had a membership, I doubt if he paid for it, but he had a membership at Lakewood Country Club. He'd play golf twice a week. The guys just couldn't do that.
He was well connected with people because of his...
He's always very well connected.
And he didn't have children either, too. So
no, they had no children. And his wife had a heart attack in 1944. He has his first heart attack in 45. That's when Dr. Walvoord becomes the, president without being president.
So that's the next chapter that we want to discuss, chapter number 4. You've entitled it The Stabilization of the Seminary, and you focus on the influence and lasting impact of John Walvoord, the second president of Dallas Seminary.
Dr. Walvoord, John Walvoord, obviously he's Scandinavian from Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Racine, Wisconsin. Very godly family. He came as a student. He could have gone to Princeton, he says, but he was persuaded by Chafer, who's doing all this traveling, speaking. And people are saying, I'd like to be able to do what he's doing, speaking, teaching the Bible. Encourage him to Dallas.
By the way, that's most of our students come here because they've had a pastor that's able to clearly explain the Bible, and they say, I want to be like them.
I want to, this guy makes sense. So, he graduated from Wheaton College under J. Oliver Boswell. And Boswell suggested he come here in 1931. So he did, and he took his 3 degrees, THB, THM, and THD here, and became the registrar following the death of Roland Thomas in the 40s. So he's basically the president's assistant, organizer of the school. And then in 52, with Dr. Chafer's demise, he becomes our second president. And he stabilized our school in the sense that he did a simple thing. He sent out prayer letters that announced our need. And faculty have been paid ever since. Just amazing gift.
And he had a long tenure, too.
Yeah. He was our president until 86. So he lasted 34 years.
Wow, that's a very long term.
Yeah. He was a little bit autocratic when you... I mean, I don't want to be unkind, but unless there's reason, it's his way or the highway.
Which is a lot of leaders in those days.
Yeah, and he wasn't mean. He wasn't that at all.
Right.
He wanted to be a missionary. That was his passion. And when he was here, imagine this tall, 6-foot-plus guy, would go to Nebraska into the rural areas to orchestrate vacation Bible schools and churches. So that's always been our passion. It's people.
So Walvoord's long tenure, good administrator, fundraiser, the school
And he
grew in a large number during that time. Yeah.
But Dr. Walvoord was our real first aristocratic leader. I mean, he looked it.
He's
gentle,
6, how tall? 6'?
6'3" or 4", okay. I think he was. Yeah. And but he was gentle. But he was a man of purpose.
Yeah. I arrived here in 2000 to be a seminary student working on my THM, and it was still in the catalog said the theology of Louis Berry Chafer, and Dr. Walvoord was listed as the professor,
Yeah.
but I arrived, it wasn't being taught anymore. It's still in the catalog, and I was really sad that I wanted to hear from Dr. Walvoord the
Well, I think
theology of
Dr.
Chafer.
Walvoord and Ryrie took Dr. Chafer's 6 volumes and boiled them down to their image of Dr. Chafer's theology.
In the 2 abridged versions.
Yes, I think so. Not seriously, but you can see nuances of difference.
Sure. Maybe updated and even in
I think so.
dispensational thoughts.
I think so. And the tensions we're facing with the rise of, say, Fuller Theological Seminary, which became the intellectual flagship of our movement, not us. And we lost Everett Harrison. Really the first real, I would say, Merle Unger and Dr. Feinberg and Everett Harrison were our real scholars.
Yeah. Feinberg went out to Talbot, right? The first dean of Talbot Seminary,
That's right.
which is Biola connected.
And they could be paid.
Did they leave on good terms?
Yes. Yeah.
And Everett Harrison went to Trinity?
Everett Harrison went to Fuller
Fuller, okay.
when that was
That's
founded.
right.
And
That's right. And didn't stay very long, did he?
no. Well, we understand why.
Right. The seminary pretty quickly changed its position.
That's
on
right.
inerrancy, right?
Yeah, they changed inerrancy in about the 70s because they were running out of money.
You think?
Oh, I know.
Wow.
And a member of the board. Fuller. To be fair, Fuller Seminary wanted to serve the broader Christian community by putting faithful pastors into their pulpits and all otherwise. So you can't fault that. They're willing to suspend certain convictions to have that broader platform. So you can't complain about that. But when they were running out of money, and the money really came from Charles Fuller, the evangelist, and Charles Fuller's son went to Princeton, not here. There's
He went to Europe too, didn't he?
yes, he did.
For his
Very
PhD.
fine man. But the problem became when they're losing money or not having money, what to do. And a board member, Weyerhaeuser, of the great lumber industry of the Northwest, told them that if they would drop the doctrine of inerrancy, he'd support school completely. It's called Black Saturday. The board met, and they changed the doctrinal statement, put it in a safe, life goes on.
That's what it comes down to, right? God has revealed himself, he's made himself known, and we can know him in the inspired and inerrant word.
Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. You can't choose what you don't know. How will they hear unless they be sent? That's our passion.
So John Walvoord helped stabilize, and the school grew. When you have a long tenure like that, it's helpful, right? When you have lots of changes in leadership, sometimes that causes a lot of problems.
And
we see that.
When budget wasn't met, Walvoord chipped in what was left. I mean, it's profound. It's an untold story.
Really?
Yeah.
And where did he get that from?
His own pocket.
Publishing? His own
pocket.
his success as a publisher?
Yeah, his books brought in quite a bit of money. I can't really say what part of his budget it came from. I don't have that.
Yeah.
But I do know we always met our budget.
Nice. In just a moment, we'll return to our previously recorded program. But first, our missions moment of the week. Recently, I returned from a trip to the country of Hungary, where I served as a professor of Bible and theology for 13 years. While there, I had the privilege also to interview Gergő, a current student at the Bible Institute. Join me as we listen in.
My name is Jakob Gergő, and I'm a student at Word of Life Bible Institute, Hungary. I just wanted to have like a solid foundation with my faith in God. When I came here, I actually had very different plans, where I wanted to be a movie maker. And then slowly during the first year, God really changed my mind mind and really showed me how that was more of a selfish plan. And then I started to think more about missions, the needs here in Hungary. I always thought that I would know a lot before coming here, but actually I had to figure out that I don't know that much. And it's just opened up my eyes in a lot of different ways. I would recommend everybody who has the opportunity to come to the BI. It's worth it. I want to disciple the youth of Hungary and evangelize. I also just teaching what I've heard here and what I have learned here. I'm also camp staff member, leading the Guy volunteers, and also doing youth group ministries.
If you'd like to partner with Word of Life Hungary Bible Institute in training Central Europeans for the work of the ministry by supporting scholarship students like Gergu to attend the Word of Life Hungary Bible Institute, visit wolbi.hu. That's WOL for Word of Life, BI for Bible Institute, .hu for Hungary, HU. And now back to our previously recorded program. Well, Dr. Campbell was the next president, third president of Dallas Theological Seminary. For most of our listeners, he may be the least known of the presidents. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about
Dr. Campbell was born actually in Indiana, raised in Illinois. Dad and Mom
I'm
were
from Indiana, so I appreciate him already.
The Hoosier State. He left it as soon as he could. No. His dad and mom were godly people. He went to Wheaton, finished Wheaton in 46, and because of the ties and Bible conferences and all that, he heard a man by the name of William McCarroll, founder of the IFCA, Independent Fundamental Churches, and that changed his life. And so he was told at Wheaton to go to Dallas. And so in 1946 he came. Post-World War II, there was a real surge of young men entering the seminary. We didn't have housing, so we had a trailer park. And Don Campbell was the mayor of Trailerville. Really happy guy. So he took his PhD, and then he taught 1 year at Bryan College.
Okay.
And then he was called back, in part to be registrar, and in part to be professor of Bible and state.
He was a good administrator, too. He was the academic dean under Walvoord for many years, right? His tenure is short, right? Because he was older.
Only
when
about
he took
5 years. Yeah. But it was the oil crisis hit us. I asked him when I was researching the book, I said, Dr. Campbell, how did you feel as you went through this crisis? We weren't paid. We weren't given a raise for 5 years, for instance. We couldn't. And we lost faculty during that time because they couldn't live that way. He said, during my tenure, I slept like a baby. I woke up every hour crying. So,
stress.
The stress of it. And his wife was ill. And yet, the gift that he gave us, I think, is that he recognized that evangelicalism is broader than we are. Of course, everybody does. But therefore, he opened the student body. He broadened the spiritual and theological theological qualifications to come into our school. And he had the idea that we should reach out.
Students or faculty?
Students, not faculty. And so we have an abbreviated doctrinal statement for entrance that students are required to sign, but we, as faculty members, sign a much larger one and hold to that. So he opened, I think, Walvoord brought stability and growth. Campbell brought a widening influence in evangelicalism to us, which was really a gift. I mean, that's where we began to have extensions. It just multiplied. When you think of what he accomplished, it's amazing.
In just a few years.
Yeah.
So you may be conjecturing here, but board usually looks for someone that's got 20 years to contribute, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a 50-year-old, if someone's going to go into their 70s, or 45, if they're going to go into their 60s. They chose someone much older.
Well, he was a transitional figure.
Yeah.
No one really follows. Anybody who follows Walvoord is bound to be compared, and is going to lose the battle. Because Walvoord was such a stately person.
So do you think the board, they chose him knowing that he's going to be transitional president?
Typically, your dean of students becomes the president.
Well, that's kind of happened with her academic dean, right?
Academic dean.
That's what
so that happened
Bailey
with
as well, right?
Walvoord.
Oh, yes.
It happened not with Campbell. It did with Campbell. It did with Bailey. And it did with Yarborough.
Yeah.
The exception being Dr. Swindoll.
Yeah. Who we're going to talk about next. Because sometimes, quite often, academic deans don't have the fundraising ability that
That's right.
a president needs to have.
Yeah, I don't think Dr. Campbell had the pizzazz in that sense.
Because they're a different skill set. Typically,
right.
administration and support raising,
Yeah.
fundraising.
And so when Dr. Swindoll came to us, who's a national figure, we never had much of a national figure. I mean,
who's definitely our most famous pastor, right?
I mean, this man could have been appointed chaplain to the U.S. Congress. He turned it down because he said, I'm a churchman. So, he's just a unique man that God put his fingers on. But I would say Dr. Swindoll, the two great contributions that I see he made is the restabilization of the school after the tragedy of the oil crisis and the theological fracturing. But his two passions, he would tell us, is to make sure that no faculty left here because of salary issues. So our salaries took off. I mean, he could raise the money.
And you loved him for it.
I think every faculty member of the older cast saying, I pay my bills. It just boomed. He wanted salaries commensurate with other institutions of the same ilk.
Today in a faculty meeting, someone was speaking, a guest from that had been in chapel this last week, and he said he came to Dallas Seminary and he knew two names, Chuck Swindoll and David Jeremiah. Right?
Yeah.
That's why he came to Dallas Seminary.
That's right.
Just because he knew those two names as influential pastors.
They come.
Dallas Seminary graduates, obviously.
Yeah, our students are our best recruiters, which is really nice. And so Dr. Walvoord, or Dr. Swindoll had really two passions. One was faculty, care for the faculty. The other was to bring the student population back to the campus. So being a pastor, all of us have worked in pastoral ministry, but we're not pastors full time. He understood the power of community. And so we have, Swindoll Hall.
Yeah.
And he did a lot from a community point of view, and for the faculty, tremendously. And extensions blossomed under him, multiple programs from 3 to, now we have 15. I think that, but he was a, what would I say? Dr. Walvoord was a religious statesman. Dr. Swindoll was a statesman. He could work in all kind of places. And, being on Insight for Living. And yet he was the humblest man I've ever met. He never took credit. And I don't think the others did either, but he stands out because of the pedestal he was on. And he loves this school. It changed his life. I mean, Dr. Hendricks changed his life.
Any challenges that Bailey faced during those 20 years that were interesting to the...
I think the only, he would know more. I think
because this book ends with Bailey, president, and you really kind of left it there, right?
Yeah.
So
that's
you need another chapter to talk about Bailey. Dr.
Well,
Bailey's
and I need
era.
one to set us up for Dr. Yarborough.
That's right.
I think the challenge he faced was a secularizing culture. Students coming from an educational background from a family and educational background with less and less spiritual Christian depth. So I think he struggled in that. How do we address that? I think Yarborough, our new president, has really got a handle on it. I can see massive changes. He's one of our youngest presidents, but I think Dr. Bailey was the best of our heritage to perpetuate it. But I think Dr. Yarborough has a grip on the postmodern culture and how to intersect with it. And I see it on campus. And now we have the issues of globalism, finally. I can see just really wonderful things coming our way.
Well, as we wrap up this conversation, we've covered a lot of ground, 100 years. Are there any thoughts or challenges you might leave our listeners with as it relates to the history of Dallas Seminary and what we can learn from it?
I think the great prayer need we have, you can't make a person better who doesn't come with the circumstance and passion to be better. So I think my great prayer request is that God would raise up young men and women with spiritual maturity. Students ask me, what in 50 years of teaching, what's the difference? My answer is helping students now requires the changing of more diapers. They come with more baggage. They don't come from strong churches. Their prior ecclesiastical works have helped them to the Lord, nor strong homes. So how do you make them into a godly servant? They're already godly, but servant leader without that background experience they don't, even though they don't have. That's hard. And yet the miracle will keep happening because God's word is God's word. And we have faith that I learned a verse in Bible college, his word will not return void. So you do what's right and keep doing it. So I would say pray for us for that. Pray as our culture becomes much more secular and the supports of Christianity weaken, that we would stay faithful. There's a lot of sirens out there begging us to change. I don't think we should. Right? And I don't think we should be caught up in the worship of success. That's a killer.
Yeah.
Because then you think of yourself more. I think the success we've had is because God has been bountifully graceful. It's not our ingenuity. I mean, look at us. We're just a bunch of guys and gals. But God has honored his word. So we live our lives in dependence upon him for the young men and women of the next generation. And we really cry out for them.
Very good. As it relates to that, I remember Chuck Swindoll saying in a chapel, maybe last year, saying, I hope that not many of you become successful too soon. In other words,
you got to grow into success because you'll appreciate it more, but talk about it less.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, the gift.
Humility is hard when you are successful right away.
However
you measure success.
You can build an empire and become impervious to criticism. But we need criticism to help us stay on track.
So we're thankful for the history of Dallas Seminary, thankful for you and your influence here for over 50 years. And we do pray that Dallas Seminary will remain faithful to God's Word and to investing into the lives of young men and women for another 100 years or until the Lord returns.
We know institutions are frail, but we pray so. Thank you.
Thank you
for the opportunity.
All right.
This has indeed been another very fascinating discussion, and I'm thankful for the impact that Dallas Theological Seminary has had in my life and ministry for over 20 years, and the impact that our graduates are having around the world. If you're interested in sitting under the teaching of professors committed to the preaching and teaching of God's inspired and inerrant Word, I'd encourage you to consider Dallas Theological Seminary. It would be my privilege to be one of many professors who would invest in you and your future service for the glory of God. To learn more, visit us at dts.edu. That's dts.edu. Well, I hope that you'll join us again for our next episode. I'm excited to welcome Dr. Scott Stripling to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast to discuss the Exodus. Did you know that some scholars don't believe that the Israelites ever lived in Egypt or that there was ever an Exodus event? We'll be discussing with Dr. Stripling the historicity and dating of the Exodus out of Egypt based upon the biblical text and the archaeological evidence. You won't want to miss it. But until next time, never forget, Bible and theology really does matter, because what you really believe determines how you really behave.
Bible and Theology Matters podcast is a listener-supported podcast
devoted to helping Christians grow in their knowledge of the Word of God and in their relationship to the God of the Word.
To learn how you can partner with the Bible and Theology Matters podcast,
Visit us at BibleandTheologyMatters.com. That's Bible, A-N-D, TheologyMatters.com.